I first tell people I want somebody who's been in the jungle, not somebody who's just studied the maps.
That's
right. And the other is I want somebody to know, and this is a lot of the work that we do, that Alan and I do, and that Alan focuses on in his work about emotional sobriety is that I want to know you're still in that you're not naive and you're not delusional, and that you're still in the jungle.
It starts right here. Start right here.
Welcome back to Start Right Here. I'm Tom Rutledge, and with me is Dr. Alan Berger, my partner in crime, allegedly. So how you doing, Alan?
I just wondered if that was the FBI at your front door, or is it they're coming in to...
They'll be here.
I think Trump has reported you to the FBI.
I can't imagine that somebody from there hasn't as many things as I've sent him. It's I haven't been blocked on Twitter by Trump, which is something I would love to add to my resume, but I have not. That has not happened yet.
Well, speaking of resumes, we have a very important guest today, don't we?
We do. We have Dr. Ericha Scott, and I've known about Dr. Scott's work for I don't know how long, but just through the wonderful thing of social media, and kind of followed everything, lots of things that she's done. And when we started thinking about having guests on the show, she's certainly one of the people that came to my mind right away. Now I'm going to run through what I think is a pretty impressive list of her credentials, and probably only some of them here, but it's like I have to actually read. I have to read from this because I could not possibly memorize it. Now, and Dr. Scott, you let me know if I'm missing anything here. Dr. Scott is a fellow for the International Society of the Study of Trauma and Dissociation. Definitely want to dog ear that, because I want us to talk about that in terms of what we kind of the stuff you and I talk about, Alan. She is a board certified registered art therapist. I also want to talk about that because I've been impressed with what I've seen of her online and what I've read of her publications, and want to ask her some questions about that. She is a registered expressive arts therapist, which I just like the word expressive. Is fun to have to be sort of part of a registration. I want to be registered as an expressive guy. Internationally certified as an advanced alcohol and drug counselor. So she has something in common with us. And it's like, and she is licensed in 3 states as a psychotherapist. So have I hit the high points, Ericha?
Yes, sir. Very good job. Thank you.
Well, babbling is one of my strong suits. Reading off of a piece of paper is not. So that's the hardest part of the whole thing for me. So we're really, really happy that you're here. And you're also an artist, right? I mean, besides being an art therapist, I mean, you really are. I mean, I've seen some of the stuff you've done. You really are an amazing artist.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I mean, I don't know how much of that is your part of your day job or not, but
no, not part of my day job.
Well, if people are listening and want to learn more about you as we get to talking about this, I encourage people to look for that too, because it's pretty impressive.
Well, thank you. I was an artist before I became a counselor.
Perfect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a writer before I became. I never meant to be a therapist. It's like this is a complete accident.
Same here.
It's like I always want to be a writer. Mm-hmm. And publishers were always amazed that I could write, because so many times, you probably got this too, Alan, is when people who publish self-help books get our manuscripts, they expect them to be no good, because a lot of therapists who know a lot of things and are good therapists are not writers. And so, have you gotten that feedback too? That people are surprised that you write?
No, definitely. But I'm so caught by that you also do play therapy, and I so much want to be in the room with you and going through those things and picking out the ones that stand out for me.
You're talking about the sand tray stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Sand tray stuff is amazing.
Look at all those wonderful little figures.
Yeah, I'll turn
I just want to go play for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's not technically play therapy, although it's a first cousin. And I only work with adults, so I have some figurines that are R-rated, X-rated, that would not be appropriate for a collection for children.
Yeah, but look at Alan starting to look around. I mean,
Yeah,
you see that? It's like-
I was looking for that X-rated one. Let's help that out, Erica. Come on, point it out to us.
Oh, I have a client, a therapist, who's a client of mine who just recently began, within the last year began to do sand tray stuff, and I have become fascinated by his fascination with it because
It's fascinating.
and he'll show me pictures of some of these things that people do, and it's you really just let. And I bet you this has a lot to do with everything about your work that's artistic. Maybe this is a way to get into this. It's like the thing I find when I'm talking to this fellow about this is I go like, wow, I think the hardest part for me would be to give people a little bit of direction, just a minimal direction, and then step back and let them do their thing.
That's what you do.
Because that's what you do when you're doing what you do, right?
Explain this sand tray, because a lot of people have never been exposed to that and
Okay.
even seen it before. Maybe that would be a good start.
That would be great.
Mhm.
So as in a way that's common with really good ideas, two women came up with the same theory about the same time. In two different countries, they didn't know each other. They ended up meeting later in life. And the idea was to use miniature figurines to have children portray their world. One did it on a tabletop, another one did it in miniature little sandboxes. And what they found is, and there was a class differential too. One was basically blue collar, children of blue collar workers, and the other was from an area that was more socioeconomically privileged. But they found that the children, when they were allowed to portray their world, it got better. And so the idea is that it accesses different parts of the brain. It's not just left brain, which is talk therapy, as you know, but also right brain, but also kinesthetic and dynamic because you move the figurines. There is some research that sand play or sand tray therapy can create neurogenesis, which means new neurons. That's pretty amazing. Now, from a study that was quoted by Dr. Ernest Rossi years ago, after he had a stroke, he said the things that help create new neurons are art, novelty, and beauty. And so in my mind, sand play or sand tray, there's slightly different theories, is very much about that. So I've used it with people, and usually they come in, often it's men who are like, oh, you want me to play? You know, I don't really want to do that. I'm thinking of a case.
Men are idiots. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of a case where a man had failed treatment 15 times. And I just said, well, why don't you do a tray about the consequences of your addiction? And so there were ambulances, hospitals, turned over cars, bottles, pills. I have pills, I have everything. I have the whole, everything, disappointed looking people, judgmental. And he stood back and he said, I had no idea. He said, my tray is so chaotic. And I said, how about your life? Is your life chaotic? It's like, well, yeah. And he got sober for the longest period of time ever, because that seemed to get through the defenses and the denial. Some people have to see it. They can't just talk about it. They don't have the capacity to imagine or picture the consequences of their life, and it doesn't become real until they see it and feel it. I mean, you know that probably on some
Well, no,
level.
what was great about that is that he confronted himself.
Exactly.
Right? He created a situation where he could confront himself.
So much more powerful.
Right. Instead of somebody else, you know, the difference between internal control and external control.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And then I can stand and bear witness and align with the client without having to confront them all the time. So, because sometimes we do have to confront lovingly our clients, or at least present how we see things differently than they do. So you're right. Ellen, you're right. Exactly right about that.
Yeah.
But you know what? Immediately, I'm looking for the commonalities. One of the things is, you know, that old Chinese proverb of what I hear, I forget; what I see, I remember; and what I do, I understand. And it's that part of that is true. And you know, what I'm saying, and it's a different way of doing it, a different modality. But you know, in a similar way, Alan, when we pull those chairs out, I don't care if I say, let's let this box of Kleenex represent that part of you, whatever that happens to be, and that's one of the things that again, I find that we have in common with you, Ericha, is that I think I speak for Alan when I say this. We've learned that you don't have to be in power struggles with clients, you know. And I finally got to the place where I was able to say, you don't ever have to be in a power struggle with a client, and if you are, you're making a mistake. Yeah. It's not the client's mistake. It's like it's our mistake. And I wrote down that sentence, which is exactly the part where you were responding to, Alan, which I think I just love great sentences. My tray is so chaotic. The guy said, you know, he still got it distant a little bit there. And you just ask a question for him to actually put that together. So you know, to him, the brilliance, you know, of you is wow, how'd she do that magic trick?
I've seen one tray change someone's life. Now, obviously that doesn't happen every week, but I've seen one tray motivate people to become engaged in therapy and realize the work they needed to do to get better and become more proactive versus the victim of their circumstance. They see the work that they need to do. I have permission to talk about this. I've published about it, but a man who was a prison guard had performed CPR to about 12, 14 different prisoners who had either attempted suicide or had heart attacks. And it wasn't his job. He volunteered. In fact, he said he would kind of muscle his way in, and it was very traumatizing. And the reason that was behind his push to do that was kind of a classic Freudian reenactment of a trauma. His firstborn son had died of SIDS. And he by the time he found his baby, it was too late. His baby was blue and cold, and there wasn't a way to resuscitate his child. And so he became compulsive about trying to resuscitate people near death. But CPR is not always pleasant, and people don't always survive. And sometimes he would be told to keep doing it until the ambulance came, and that'd be 30, 40 minutes to more than an hour. So he was very traumatized by the time he came in. I joke, I sometimes see people and the symbols almost. And when he came, normally they never would put someone in my group in the middle of group at Sierra Tucson. I think they weren't sure what to do with him. And they opened the door and brought him in the room. And he looked like a dragon breathing fire. He was so angry. And I thought, oof. Right now in the middle of group. Hello, welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And and there he was, and there you were.
And he did well. Yeah, he did that tray, and he said, this is what he said. He said he saw his baby in the crib, the alcohol bottles, his angry wife, the people on the ground from CPR, and the food that they would vomit sometimes, and the casket. And he looked back and forth, and the tray's designed to be a certain width and a certain depth so that you can have a gestalt view, the whole view of the tray all at once without moving your head very much, if at all. And he said, I have to deal with my trauma because it's killing me, and I want my family back. And that was it. He was off and running.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful.
It's just he needed to put it out there, create it, show it. Witnesses are important. So much of what we do is about witnessing.
Absolutely. Bearing witness. And we need to do things like this, art, music, dance, poetry, whatever, because I don't care how, I mean, you guys sound like you have really good codependency recovery, but I don't care how great your recovery is after 20, 30, for me, 36, going on 37 years. You carry it with you. And so therapists need to have their own process as well.
Absolutely. It's like I always tell people, I first tell people I want somebody who's been in the jungle, not somebody who's just studied the maps.
That's
And,
right.
and the other is I want somebody to know, and this is a lot of the work that we do, that Alan and I do, and that Alan focuses on in his work about emotional sobriety is that I want to know you're still in that you're not naive and you're not delusional, and that you're still in the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
Because codependent, I think that codependency recovery and that emotional sobriety stuff that Alan, that you're working on, and he has a new book coming out about it that I'm actually reading some of that right now, and it's wonderful. By the way, it's a wonderful book, Alan. I haven't responded to you yet about that, but it's wonderful, and it's like it is. But the thing you're talking about, Ericha, that has in common is we understand it's all about it. Is synonymous with living. It's like, it's just part of, I always think about the first step of AA. The manageability is living your life. You're managing your life. That's what we do. It's like, it's not, it's at any given moment, it's not manageable or unmanageable if we're taking care of ourselves. We're in the process of managing.
Mm-hmm. Or flowing.
Mm-hmm. Or being stuck and needing to get unstuck.
And this has been the year of stuck, hasn't it?
Yeah. But it's also been the people, I call it the involuntary COVID values clarification retreat. And it's like people have really been learning there this time. I think one of the battle cries we need to have is for ourselves and as professional people helpers is don't forget what you're learning. Because, that's one of the things that people do that we do very well. And that is we forget.
Yeah.
But we have a very short-term memory.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But, go back to what you said about so many of us in the field lose ourselves sometimes in the work we do with clients. I love what Carl Whitaker said about this. He was one of,
I like Carl Whitaker.
I love Carl Whitaker's work. And he says it's very important for us. Well, first of all, he said it's something that I've always took to heart. He says, therapy is best described as two anxious people getting together. Hopefully, the therapist is a little less anxious than the client. First, I love that one. I mean, I think that's that leveling thing, right? But then he went on to say, he says, therapy is the therapist is, he says, it's important for a therapist to remember you're important for you're responsible for the therapy, but you're not responsible for your patient's life.
Very nice.
You're responsible for the therapy, but not for your patients' lives. And so many new therapists, and even some people have
even old
been around, that boundary gets blurred.
It does.
It gets so blurred at times.
And I'm thinking if the therapist isn't less anxious than the client, hopefully they're able to connect and attach in a way where they help. I'm thinking of Porridge's research, they help each other regulate. Their connection helps both regulate better.
Well, but part of what we're tracking when we're with that client too is the by definition previously unknown chemistry of not only that relationship but of that conversation. I mean, this is to me one of the reasons that I tend to think that I've learned enough to go, what Erica's going to come on the podcast. What are you going to talk about? It's like, I don't know. We can have some ideas, and it's a good. It always makes me feel a little bit less anxious if I have ideas to back it up, just in case, like I ran out of things to say. Now pause for Patrick and Alan to laugh that I would run out of things to say. Yes, never happened.
Are you from Tennessee originally?
I'm from Texas.
Oh. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm obligated as being from Texas to say that.
You are. I was born in Texas too.
Where?
Dallas.
Oh, Dallas. I grew up in Plainview, Texas.
Okay.
It's kind of the West Texas, not so great, but I went to school near Dallas and lived some of my life there. But well, you know that when you have to sign all that paperwork that says you'll always forever define yourself as a Texan.
And carry, what is it, wire clippers in your back pocket?
Yes, I've never heard that one.
Why is the wire clippers?
For wrestling, so you can wrestle cattle.
So you can get Russell cattle. There you go. I missed that part.
Yeah, I was a law-abiding citizen, unlike you, clearly, Erica. it's like, but going back to this, it's like that's one of the things, and I mean, and I start saying you can't teach it, but I guess you can teach things about it. But it's like I don't know why this one pops into my mind, but there's a dynamic that has happened to me through the many years I've been doing this work, and the way I would describe it in brief is, and I'd be interested in your take on this, Erica, is that earlier in my career, I would get, if I felt lost in a session, and I would begin to feel like I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't track and stuff like that. Because I was extremely self-critical, self-condemning. And so I would just beat the holy crap out of myself after that session. The session would be, as far, as is often the case, the session would be fine for the client, but it's like for me, I would beat the hell out of myself. But fast forward many years, maybe decades, it's like, I've now realized, I recognize if I find myself lost and confused in a session, that what's happening for me is I don't know how to say it otherwise than just psychically, I'm actually closed in enough to where I'm somehow experiencing just sort of the tip of the iceberg of something that client is experiencing. And if I start to describe, sometimes if I know the person pretty well, I'll just say, let me describe something to you, and I'll describe it, and almost always so far, it's like they'll go, yeah, that's it. And so what I've realized is again, it's a little, I'm mixing our metaphors here, but it's a little bit like you're talking about keeping that whole sand tray in your field of vision. Keep the big picture in mind. And one of the fun parts about doing this work is that part of the creativity of like, something's happening here, let's explore it together and find out what it is.
Well, a word comes to my mind. I'm a big fan of Dr. Irv Polster, who was the clinical director of the Gestalt Institute in San Diego. And he says a very important component of good psychotherapy is that the therapist helps the client portray their life. And there's a portrayal in your sand tray is what
absolutely
you're talking about. See, a person gets to look at it. And that's what he says. He says, I don't change anyone. What I do is really help them become aware. He promotes an awareness of their life through that portrayal.
Excuse me, I'd like to jump in. And that could be the external life and the internal life.
Yeah, that's right.
To portray their life.
It's my favorite book of his is Every Person's Life is Worth a Novel. I love the book, and it's the only time I read it, but I love the title as much as I love the book. I mean that talk about a title that just has so much to say. Every Person's Life is Worth a Novel. It's like, it's just, I mean, talk about and that is what, our interest. We can get interested in people's lives, and we can reignite their interest in their own life.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think.
Go ahead, Erica.
I think what you were saying about sometimes we feel the client's experience, and I believe that's true. That's part of being intuitive and empathetic and embodied. But we really have to know ourselves. We have to know our own levels of anxiety, shame, anger, and we need to understand the level and our triggers. So we have to know our own history, our own story, our own life, inner and outer life. An example I have is I had a client return to therapy after several years without therapy. She had terminated appropriately. She was doing well, and she came back. I had no shame about her coming back. I was thrilled she was coming back. She was a delightful client. And I walked in the room to greet her, and all of a sudden my stomach hurt. And And I was like, whoa. And it was like sudden. And I sat there with it for a minute. I was actually standing, but in my mind. And I looked at her and I said, you know, I was feeling fine. I walked in the room and now my stomach hurts. And I'm just wondering, is there any chance you're feeling shame about coming back to therapy? And she burst into tears, burst into tears. And part of how that could happen was that I knew it wasn't mine.
Yeah.
I knew it wasn't mine. And yet I think we also have to own what is ours so the client doesn't feel it. Because we don't want them doing therapy about our inner work that we're disowning.
Well, unless they're going to do a better job than I would. I mean, you know, if I can get somebody to do it for me, you know, I'll do it anytime.
It doesn't help them or you.
Oh yeah, that.
So I would like to talk a little bit about my art experientials that I offer, because I think it answers one of the questions about what do you do when you don't know what to do. So after the fires, the Woolsey fires, I don't know if you know, we had the fires here in Malibu 2 years ago, and over 450 homes burned to the ground in our small town, very small town. That's a lot of homes that didn't just burn to the ground. And our community was devastated. I held a free art workshop, to have people make art with what they found in the ash. Now, I'm so used to having people do this kind of art that cuts right to the bone and to the core of things, that it wasn't until people I knew walked in that I did not know they had lost their homes, with shards. That's all they had left. And we made beautiful art. It was very moving. So we had that tragedy. It affected all of us. I didn't lose material things. And yet it had its impact. It had its impact on all of us. It was a community tragedy. Yeah. So one of the things I've always wanted to do and have done before, I used to design art experientials for kids, for museums. I did that before I became a therapist. I used to design art exhibits for kids. So I have wanted for a while to do creative arts intensives, creative art, expressive arts, writing, journaling, poetry writing, clay, painting, sculpting, you name it. We even make mandalas on the beach. And so I started offering that in 2019. And I'll tell you, it's the favorite thing I've ever done in my life. Really? So people come in for a minimum of 2 days back to back. It's really important because you understand when people are doing something intense, there needs to be a buildup of intensity. So we work from 1 to 5, which is my optimal time. It just seems to be the time where I'm most intuitive, most grounded, like in my element. They come to my tiny office here in Malibu on Point Doom. They usually stay in a hotel. And so, of course, we do intake. I gather some history. I talk a little bit about the processes. I demonstrate, and then we start. We start often with a sand tray or painting a mandala, or what you can't see is that way. On the wall is butcher block paper. Sorry, you can't look far enough to see it.
I'm trying to see it.
So if my office was neater over there, I would turn my camera so you could see it, but I have butcher block paper mounted on the ceiling. So I can just pull it down so people can stand and paint on the wall. And of course we do life-size body silhouettes, which I call life-size silhouette mandalas. But we also just paint abstracts. Sometimes people who have no art background will paint an abstract 3 by 6 feet. Huge. Yep. And I love the big painting because, as you know, an infant, their first gestures are gross movements. like little babies, their arms flail. And then as we grow and mature, then more fine motor. So you begin to write when you're in first grade or before. So I move people through a very intimate, very personal journey of their history, of their blocks, of the problems that have shown up over and over. We work it from issues of attachment, development, addiction. I don't think anyone comes to see me that doesn't have an addiction of some sort. Compulsivity, if not addiction, is so rampant in our society. And just lovingly kind of move people from process to process. So if the client gets stuck, then I might move them to another process that accesses another part of the brain. So one thing I use that I really enjoy are blind contour self-portraits. I published an article about this in the Sober World. And it's an old art technique. Picasso used it, Rodin used it. It's where Rodin used to draw under a table so he couldn't see the paper while he was drawing sketches of his models. And when I first learned it, I spoke with a neuropsychologist, and I said, I think that when you draw without looking at the paper, that's why it's called blind contour self-portraits, and you stare in the mirror, I think it forces you to cross your corpus callosum back and forth, which is like an internal EMDR, bilateral processing. And a lot of art processes inherently have a bilateral processing element. And he said, you're absolutely right. Now, what I have also learned is that the corpus callosum is often damaged when there's childhood trauma. You know how many of our clients are adult children of alcoholics or mental illness or poverty or chaos or violence. And so the corpus callosum that connects both sides of your brain is damaged in early childhood. And this is the good news. Using your corpus callosum heals it. Isn't that cool?
That's cool.
And so with sand play causing neurogenesis, new neurons, we all want new neurons, by the way, all of us. And then the different processes actually healing the parts of the brain that are impacted, specifically our population. It's really important. And then the other is working with how people dissociate. And so the dissociation can be a numbing, a physical numbing. It can be issues of memory. But to be diagnosed, it's more issues of memory and identity. And not everybody has the identity confusion piece. But we work with all that in a very gentle, non-diagnostic way, where people can move into this state of self. So what I say is we all have states of self. And if you had a loving family and you integrated your family, we all have kind of like the inner mom, dad, siblings, then your inner dynamic world is more kind and loving the way your family was. But if you had a violent, chaotic, alcoholic family that was judgmental and blaming, and you integrate your family system inside yourself, guess what you've got? You need family therapy inside of yourself. And so we do that as well. So one woman came and she flew across the country, probably not the only client. I've had three referrals for one client. And she sat down in my office and she said vehemently, almost the first thing she said is, I hate art therapy. Yeah. And I was like, well, how did you sign up for it?
Let's be clear about this. I hate this thing I signed up for.
How did you sign up for it? And so we did the intro day. We did writing, painting, sculpting, sand play. And then the next morning, without being prompted by me, She wrote the first gratitude list of her entire life,
Mhm.
30 items on the list. And then she came in, and no surprise, the second day she started to get mad at me. That's not a surprise. I felt it. It was coming my direction. And normally I would not have someone paint their anger right on their body map. Normally I wouldn't do that. But in this case, it just felt appropriate. And I said, I want you to paint your anger. And she goes, on my body map? I said, yep, that's where it started. And so she painted this explosion of judgmental names that she had been called, that she called herself. And it was red and black and yellow. And like, it was just, it was almost as if she attacked her body map, the symbol of herself, with a knife instead of a paintbrush. It was so intense.
It was violent. Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah.
And I had her stand back and I said, I just want you to look at it. So I don't do interpretation or analysis because that's so idiosyncratic. And I said, I just want you to feel it and sense it and experience it. And I was sitting in this chair right here, facing toward her. She was standing and she turned down and looked at me and she said, for the first time in my life, I'm all here.
Wow.
I've got insights and they're mine and I'm not giving them away. That's
She's
word
not-
for word what she said.
She's letting herself be who she is. Absolutely. That's wonderful.
I still have goosebumps.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you, I think I couldn't make someone say that. And it's really the process of letting people have the process with total integrity and authenticity, staying out of their way and not getting frightened or controlling and not interfering and not getting my ego involved. Like, oh, this means that, and that means this, because I have no idea.
Right.
I mean, I have some ideas, but it's
Right. I never interpret things for people unless they get it wrong, and then I explain it to them why they're wrong. But other than that, but the idea, and seriously, that one of the things that is clear to me that you're very your being is very good at is just holding that space, as they say, just really being present and being that. And the other thing I want to back up just for a second and say, because I think this is also one of those things that has an application in all for people who are listening, who are not doing this or that or one kind of therapy or another. But there's something you said a bit ago that is so important, and that is you said when they come to your intensives, they're going to come for at least 2 days in a row. It's like now, so that's just that's the way they're going to do that. But what I extracted from that was the concept of to be able to understand that we're going to go into this and we're going to stay in it. And it's one of the reasons that sometimes these week-long programs that we used to do, are really amazing. But you don't have to, when you're doing an hour and a half therapy session, we got to zip everything back up, and
you have to go home.
Yeah. Even though we're going to reopen the incision next week, it's like, we need to do this. It's like, so, but even when you're doing the week to week therapy, the idea, I try to paint this picture for people I never realized I've used that phrase before, paint the picture, but it's like that, we're having a conversation that is just arbitrarily broken off into these little segments.
Right.
And I think that idea to see this, and actually Alan and I have talked about this because I see this podcast as that that this is just one conversation that Alan and I have, and it's like we just go wherever it takes us, and now we're beginning to bring people in and join us into the conversation, and it's I just think that understanding this is rather than, okay, how did I do with that therapy session, or how did I do with this or that? But to be able to get a broader scope, and I keep coming back to I'd not heard that idea of the dimensions of the sand tray are such that you can see it without moving your head. It's like, I love that, and I just and I have to go to Metaphors Anonymous soon, but it's like it just becomes one of my favorites. It's like, because that's what we're trying to do. We want to be able to, we got to go in and get the details sometimes, but we got got to come back, and home base needs to be where we can see this. And what I
Right.
tell my clients is, this is an investigation. You know,
Yeah.
we're investigating together about all of this stuff, and we're going to discover all kinds of stuff. And I may come up with it, you may come up with it, but we'll come up with it together. But it's all dependent upon staying in the
That's right.
process.
So there are advantages of weekly therapy because it's useful for clients to learn how to open up, what is enough, and how to close things back down and
Good
do
point.
life. The problem with weekly therapy is that it compartmentalizes the process, and compartmentalization is part of the whole problem that we're trying to address.
Right.
Someone's laughing. I heard someone giggle.
Me, I'm laughing. That's
Okay, yeah.
the laughing. That's the laughter of
Oh, yeah.
recognition.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, got it.
And so the grief I have around COVID is that I feel we need more connection, more face-to-face energy sharing, more time. So when people come to my office, it sounds corny, but I do have a lit candle. I do serve tea. I serve refreshments. It's an invitation to have some grace and Tennessee, Southern manners. My family from Tennessee too, and time, because we rush so much all the time. I have friends sometimes they have to work hard and 24/7, and they call and they're talking so fast. I say, okay, try to breathe, like, but we're all going so many different directions. So if someone does come to my office now during COVID for a retreat, I do ask them to get a COVID test the day before. And there's a very easy way to do that here in Malibu, and they charge your insurance. So, and I get a new test. So, because as we know, if you spend more than 15 minutes together, even with a mask on and you're inside, you still have a high risk for contagion. And so it's not perfect, but it's a system to reduce the risk. And so far, no one's complained about it.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. I said, you know how they teach you how you catch COVID? That's what I do for a living. I sit in a room with somebody for an hour and a half and spit on them, and they spit on me, and that's stuff. So we're being really careful.
Are you wearing masks?
No, I don't. I haven't seen a client since March.
Okay.
In person. I love my Zoom. Because but I so much respect people who are doing everything, and because one of the things, a little off the subject maybe, but one of the things that gets on my last nerve about this is people, it's maybe it's not off the subject. One of the things we can do is we make ourselves the exception to the rule. It's like we're able to do, we see this through the holidays, well, I bet you that we could because of this, or I have a friend who's a really smart person. And it's like, but she says, oh no, I think we're good. We're okay. We could get together because we're okay. And I trust you. I'm going like, I don't think that has anything to do with it.
Right.
But she means it entirely. She just what she wants is I think I am registered as something. I'm a registered introvert. It's like, so I'm one of the people that basically they say, don't see anybody. And I go, okay.
Yeah.
And then go take my dog for a walk. It's like, but this woman is not, and I understand that. It's like, she just misses people and gatherings and things like that so much, and we just have to be aware that how our mind we can play little tricks on ourselves. I think now maybe we don't have a corner on the market, but as a recovering addict, I think I'm particularly tuned into how I can fuck myself over. So, and how I can con myself easily. So I'm a little bit more attuned to that when I start to hear that happening. It doesn't have to do anything with alcohol or drugs. I'm going like, wait a minute, my con man is working again.
Yeah. I do not see weekly clients anymore in my office. That is way too risky. So Yeah.
But you got to miss doing the sand tray thing, because that has to, you can't do sand. Can you do sand tray on Zoom? Can you?
Mm-mm.
It's like, yeah, that's like my wife is an equine therapist. You know, the horses are not very cooperative with the whole Zoom thing.
No, but, and I can, like, with talk therapy, I can ask people to do assignments on their own time, and then present them to me. So people will take pictures of what they're doing and send them to me.
Yeah, I've been really pleasantly surprised to figure out ways that you really can do experiential therapy on Zoom. It's really nice, and it's because at first I was thinking, oh, that's just out the window, but it's not at all. It just calls on us to be more creative.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is fun.
Before we wrap today, you know, one of the questions I have for you, Ericha, which I think would be quite interesting for a lot of the people that tune into us, is what do you see as the process when someone's working with their trauma? Like what do you see typically that happens as somebody starts to digest that experience, and when you see it resolve well, what does that look like?
Wow. Okay, well, there is not one answer for everyone. That means, as you know, different things for different people. I'll speak to my own life. I started going to CODA and Al-Anon when I was about 30.
So about 5 years ago?
About 36 years ago.
Oh,
I started going about a year before I became a therapist.
wow.
And a crisis woke me up to that there was something going on. I'm going to tell a dramatic story. It'll shock you. So I didn't use drugs. I was scared of them. But twice I got involved with drug dealers. The first one was a man I had known since I was 5. So a year after we broke up, we had lunch because I knew his whole family and we'd known each other forever. And he said, "Do you know why we broke up?" And I said, "No." And he said, I was dealing cocaine. And you could have knocked me over with a feather. I was so stunned. But everything made sense. His jitteriness, his too much money for our age. He had way too much money for our age. His grandiosity, fast talking,
Oh yeah.
not reliable, but right. Now he'd always been a little like that, even when I was 5, but it was over the top. So he gave me a humongous gift, and that gift, I think, saved my life. So about 5 years later, I became involved with a man, and guess what? He was a fast talker. He had too much money, and then he didn't have any money, and then he had too much money, and then he was unreliable. And it's one thing to ask or talk with your friend that you've known since you were 5 about that he might be a drug dealer. It's another to ask a man who has no connection like that with you. And so naively I said, "Is there any chance you're dealing drugs?" And I saw in his face that my life was in danger. And I made an excuse to exit. And within about 2 weeks, I went to the Meadows for trauma. And at the time Pia Melody was there, but they really didn't have an official program. And so when I applied or called, he's like, "Well, you're not really appropriate for here," because I didn't have a substance abuse problem. And I said, "Well, where do I go?" He was so quiet. And he said, "Come here." And I'm to this day so grateful. So there have been many layers of my healing from trauma, but one of them was insight and awareness of the family secrets. So I felt more grounded. And one thing that happened at the Meadows, I heard a lecture about reenactment of family secrets. And I said to my therapist, who, God bless her heart, wasn't all that bright, I said, okay, it does not make sense. I'm teaching college. I have a master's degree. I'm not stupid. How did I do this twice? It would make sense if I was using drugs, but I wasn't. And I said, could it be reenactment? I wonder if my dad was a drug dealer. She was like, no way, no way. You're just coming up. I think she thought I was using drugs and making up an excuse. I said, I want to call my brother. She said, no. I said, I'm calling my brother. You can listen or not, but I'm calling my brother. So she sat in on the conversation. So I call my brother. He knew both men. I told him about the lecture. And then I said, Tom, is there any chance Dad was dealing drugs? And my brother said, where have you been? Where have you been? Now, in my defense, my brother lived with my father much more than I did growing up. But the minute he said it, it was like a Rolodex or a slideshow of things that hadn't made sense. Like when I would walk into the garage and he would shuffle papers behind him where I couldn't see them because he was printing illegal scripts for opiates.
Yeah. Yeah, you saw your life like the end of The Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis, where they take about a minute and a half to show you the entire movie again and show you how you missed every single clue. And it's like, and they're all there at one time, right there. You don't even have to move your head. That's in the sand tray.
Yeah. And the thing is, I didn't miss the clues. I just didn't know what to make of them.
That's right.
Everybody was lying to me.
Yeah, no, there was no context for that.
There was no context for it.
And it's such an interesting, when you say the therapist was saying no way, see, that's such a mistake.
It
right?
was.
I mean, I see why you said she wasn't very bright. I mean, it's like, God, it's like, how can you be so certain that didn't happen? And see, that would be so misleading for someone. Could be. But you held on to yourself. What was interesting,
I did.
You weren't going to let her, dissuade you from doing what you wanted to do, what you had a calling deep inside to do, is to find out what the reality was.
Why not ask? It didn't hurt to ask him. He could have said, oh, no.
Right.
Right.
I could have. I mean, a question's always a good thing to ask.
Well, and it is another thing for people that are listening. Don't ever let a therapist override something that you want. If it's important to you, hold on to yourself. Just because we have a degree doesn't mean we're right. Just because we're a counselor doesn't mean that we somehow, hold a crystal ball and really know everything in terms of what's going on. Don't lose yourself in therapy.
Right.
Because it could be the same thing. And you didn't lose yourself. You held on to yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. Sometimes therapists get into what I call the dark side of positivity, or they become too invested in a theory. And if it doesn't fit their theoretical model,
then you're a resistant client.
They dismiss the client's experience, which is too bad. But so for me, what happened is that it was like the blinders were taken off. Yeah. And I felt validated and more sane and relief. Even though it wasn't good news, I felt relief.
Right.
Right. My tray is so chaotic. It's like you just saw something that you had never seen before in the way you've never seen it.
You got aligned with reality in your life, and see that, to me, that's such an important thing. Tom and I on this Thursday night, Tom's been alternating with Mary Gordon. We're going through the steps as they relate to emotional sobriety, and it's very interesting. One of the things we're saying as we talk through these things is that the steps are really helping you align yourself with reality.
Right.
The reality of yourself, what your limitations are, where your gaps of knowledge exist, and also the reality of certain things like I don't have any business putting my expectations on you in terms of how you should behave or what you should do in your life. That's your business, not mine. And so it's very interesting what an important experience that is.
Mm-hmm.
And that started, that was an important part of your recovery, is what you said.
Absolutely. And it has been invaluable with my clients when they keep acting out in ways that doesn't make sense. Then I ask myself, could this be a family secret?
Yep.
That's getting played out, because the story will be told. This is what I tell clients: your secrets, your family's secrets, that story will be told. Your choice is not whether it will be told or not. It's whether you want to tell it here in therapy with art and sand play, or do you want that story to be told in the script of your life?
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And
it fits so nicely with what we've been talking about, Tom and I. And this force that exists in us that's moving us towards wholeness.
Yes.
And see, and it's transgenerational, meaning that there's this force in a family that's moving now, whatever that essence is in that family, towards completeness and wholeness. So you're right. See, that's the way I think about this. That reenactment is now, it's Freud called it a repetition compulsion kind of a thing, is when
he also talked, that's a little different, but he also spoke about reenactment.
Well, he did. The repetition compulsion was that you pick up a certain thing and then you keep doing it. But it's like you pick it up from your family, right? Obviously, that didn't happen in a context. I mean, in a vacuum, it happened in the context of your family.
Yes.
So oftentimes, right, is the way I was thinking about it. But it's very interesting to think of it in this other positive way, is that when you're reenacting it, you are attempting to find a resolution to it.
Yes.
Now, you don't have any other tools, because you can only use the tools you had when you were growing up or given in your family, and that you picked up while you were in your family. So it was that moment that you opened up a new possibility.
Yep.
And saw something that created a new possibility. So once again, it was the portrayal of your life. It was right there. It was interesting.
And the quality of men that I chose immediately became better.
Yes.
Immediately.
They were less drug dealery. Yeah.
For start, there was a long way to go from that to what I was looking for. But yes,
it wasn't a minor detail, right? I got it.
Yeah. So one is a closer alignment to the truth. For some people, that's more difficult than others. I think that, as you know, we talk about how important it is to be careful about introducing trauma too soon. And yet so many people won't stay sober if trauma isn't addressed in the original treatment for addiction. And they won't stay sober if you don't address the dissociation.
Right.
So I sent a client who was officially dissociative disorder to treatment, very famous, very good treatment center in the 90s. And she came back from and they knew, I'm not sure how much they understood. She came back from treatment and bragged about, my addict did not go to one group. And I said, well, kind of a waste of treatment for you to do that. So I think it's very, very important for there to be some training about how to work with people who are pretty fragmented. Absolutely. And who have ways to check out that we can't see, because sometimes they look like the most delightful client. They're the most accommodating, they're the most cooperative, they're the most dutiful, and they have a whole dialogue and video going on inside that's totally distracting from what's happening in the real world.
Yeah, and they have a busload of people who aren't necessarily coming to therapy
or interested in it.
That's right. That's right. Well, Ericha, I cannot thank you enough for doing this. This has been so. I feel like I've been in a bit of a workshop. I've learned some wonderful things, but you did not disappoint my expectations that it was going to be fun to talk to you and interesting and I love. And I just love finding those places like what Alan's talking about, where we just see that how those of us, and I just am fascinated about this, how those of us who are doing this work, we do it our own, everybody does it their own way because we're all individual people, but there's these common denominators that we have in there. And they always come down to respect. Mm-hmm. They always come down to respecting ourselves and respecting the people that we're working with. And it's just amazing. So before I shut up and turn it over to Alan to close this out, Alan, Patrick, did you have fun? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I learned so much today. And, I hope that before we sign off, you can let us know, where people can find you, your social media and all that good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I saw you nodding your head, Patrick. So thank you.
It was fascinating.
Patrick is totally tuned in. He gets this. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Alan says that we're actually secretly doing this for Patrick. We just keep meeting because we think maybe someday he'll be okay. Oh. We hope so.
Yeah, this is a long grift to get some free therapy.
It's working. Any way you can get it, Patrick. Don't ever be ashamed of that. Mm-hmm. So tell us about that right now, Ericha. How can people connect with you?
So my telephone number is 310-880-9761. Maybe we could put that in the chat. 310-880-9761.
Drug dealers should not call.
No,
that's
thank you.
Part of your past, right?
Unless you want to be sober.
If you want to that's right. Don't.
I'll make sure it's in the
episode. Pass that up. I'm sorry.
So my website is titled Art Speaks Out Loud. So it's www.artspeaksoutloud.org, O-R-G. Mm-hmm. And really, you can just type my name, Ericha Scott, ERICHASCOTT. It's there's a H in Ericha. Mm-hmm. And my website will pop up. So will social media. I have Facebook. I have Twitter, I have LinkedIn and Instagram.
You're all over.
Yeah, Google this girl. She's got stuff everywhere. She's got wonderful things to read. It's just really worth it.
Also a medium at one point, Ericha, or is that a different?
I am not usually public about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then I will pretend I didn't ask it. Then let's.
No, it's okay because spirituality is very much an intuition and intuitive. It's very much a part of my practice. Yeah, and I do have an intuitive, and I have different spiritual mentors, I guess is what I would call it. I've had some psychic experiences that defy explanation. Since I was a little girl, I think it's partly how I survived my family system. Mm-hmm. And so that's very much, and it's very congruent with the creative arts therapies. There's a reason every religion has icons and symbols and art, because I think it seems to open a door or a gateway to how we want to connect with spirit. I am a certified interfaith spiritual director, and so whatever religion people bring in is fine. Wow. So I'm respectful of that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, you're not alone in that, by the way. I used to do the work of connecting people with their spirit guides, and I was a past life therapist back in the 80s and the 90s, and that stuff is all integrated into who I am today. And it's I'm not the same as I was then, but it's all still part of me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I've had clients spontaneously go to past lives. I'm like, ooh, wait. But then I go, wait, I'll follow.
You just go with them. That's right. That's what you do.
I realize we're neighbors now. That you're just over the hill. I'm over in Westlake Village, California.
You are.
Yes, I
Very
did.
close. I
Very
had no idea.
Yeah,
No,
Canaan
should-
Road, straight shot over the hill.
wow,
So-
you're very close.
I'm very close now. I used to live in the South Bay for a long time, but I've heard of you through the years. And
You have.
yes, yeah.
I hope it's good.
I've worked. It's been very good. You've worked with a number of different treatment centers and stuff.
Started a few.
That's right. And I was with Bill Rader. I don't know if you remember William Rader, who started the Rader Institute. And before that, he was really the first psychiatrist. To me, he was a pioneer in addiction psychiatry and just brilliant man, and had a program at San Pedro Peninsula Hospital, South Bay Hospital. So I knew all those groups, Jerry McDonald, Judy, you know Jerry probably.
I do.
Right? Yeah, wonderful guy, and just so many great people out of that whole period of time. So yeah, so we've kind of, our lives have been in a parallel track.
I've seen both of
In
you.
fact, I was that drug dealer that you first dated.
That's right.
I was just starting to get into that when I got well. Thank God I got well at 19, because there was lots of stuff that would have happened in my life. I probably wouldn't be sitting here with you guys today if I didn't. So
Not everybody survives it.
But Alan, to be on the positive side, you would have sold a lot of drugs, though.
I think
You did that. You would have.
I would have been one of those guys that the cartel would have to come over and find me, and I'd be out in the ocean with those, Italian shoes, right? Those
Italian
with the
shoes.
fishes.
With the
with the
cement
fishes.
blocks, right?
He's swimming with the fishes. That's
my.
right. Those blocks.
Right.
It is so funny. My mom's family came from Italy. So my mom was first generation Italian American. She had 14 brothers and sisters. 14.
You didn't even have to leave your family to be a drug deeler.
That's a good point. Very good, Erica. That's right.
I'll tell you. And they became like the chief of police in the Poconos and stuff. But the corruption was unbelievable. There was such a connection with all those folks, with the mob, and it was such an interesting thing. I'd go out there to visit my cousins and stuff, and I swear to God, it was like a scene from Sopranos.
Oh my!
It was the same kind of deal going on.
Lots of gabagool.
Lots of gabagool. But one of the
Alan, you look so good. And
one of the funniest things, though, one time I'll never forget. So it was at my aunt's house, Auntie Claire, and so about 40 cousins and nephews were coming, and aunts and uncles and stuff, and they rented the tables, and there had tables of dessert and pasta and lasagna and all that other. And you walk in, and my uncle was there, and they had I can't remember the kind of dog it was, like a little schnauzer or something like that, right? But he was so anxious they put him on Valium.
Oh no!
And he had that wide gait because he couldn't walk. It was hilarious to me. This little guy's loaded, and he's trying to hold himself up by moving his legs further apart, right? Like like you see somebody does that's loaded.
Toddlers and addicts.
That's right. Toddlers and addicts. Exactly. No different. All right, Tom, how do people hear about you?
They still have stuff about me on my website, tomrutledge.com. I, like Erica, have an extra H in my name because some of us just put extra H's in our names. It's like there's a lot of extra H's, and some of us we actually are rescuers. We rescue H's and we put them in our name. And tomrutledge.com. That's right. Hell, that's right. And just, all kinds of stuff there, including some free downloads and all that stuff, and all the information about my books. That a couple of them are good Christmas gifts. So take a look at that and get your holiday shopping done on my website. So
awesome.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. I saw that you were you're promoting the two books that you're promoting are great, man. I think that they're really
the client told me about my bathroom books.
Your bathroom.
She says, you're a bathroom book
That's what
writer. I
I've
said,
been
well, I said,
reading.
I like to call it a gift book. She goes like, well, my husband didn't read it until I put it in his bathroom. And she said, then he read it and then he actually quoted from it. And then he actually referenced a page number. So I decided, well, I'm just going to promote it as a bathroom book this year. See how it goes. So yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, people can learn about me at my website, which is pretty straightforward, www.abphd.com. But I just want to put a plug in that Thursday night, we've been doing this emotional sobriety meeting since COVID started. And Tom and Mary are alternating with me as we're going through the steps. And I just want to put a shout out to you, Tom. The work you did on these last two nights, these last two Thursdays, which everybody can go and listen to. Patrick is posting these on a YouTube channel, and it was just, I mean, you really brought so much to the discussion. So I just want to recognize,
thank you.
What an addition that you made on both of those nights. So you've set a high bar for yourself, my friend.
Well, that means a lot to me because because it just does coming from you, because you know, I'll stop babbling because that's just because I'm somewhat uncomfortable with the compliment. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to pile on that compliment. Both of you are gracious, lovely hosts. Thank you. You made it very easy and fun, and
Good.
it flowed well, and I really appreciate it. I felt respected, and thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Glad you're part of us now.
And I look forward, as this thing comes down, we'll have lunch.
That would be awesome.
Let's do that. It's overdue.
Thanks so much, Erica.
All right. Thanks,
Take care.
Erica.
Bye
See ya.
bye.
Deep in your heart, start right here. That's where it starts. Right here. Won't you look to your heart? It's always in